My aunt stood in front of the whole family and pointed her finger at me like I was a criminal. "Hand it over. You were never meant to keep Grandma's ring." My cousin laughed from the couch, shaking her head. "She just stored it. It belongs to real family." I held my ground. My voice was soft, but I didn't move. I didn't flinch. The room went silent. Then my aunt reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Paperwork. She slapped it on the table and said, "Then let's prove who family really is." That's when everything collapsed. My name is Lena Whitaker. I'm 34 years old. I work as a receptionist at a community clinic during the day and study for my nursing certification at night. It's not glamorous, it's not impressive on paper, but it's mine, and I built it slowly, on my own terms. I grew up mostly raised by my grandmother because my parents were struggling financially. They loved me, but they couldn't always be there. My dad worked double shifts at a warehouse, and my mom cleaned offices overnight. So Grandma stepped in. She didn't just babysit me, she raised me. She taught me how to cook rice without burning the bottom of the pot. She taught me how to read people by watching their hands instead of their mouths. She taught me that showing up matters more than showing off. But to the rest of the family, I was temporary. I was the kid who happened to be around. Helpful, sure. Convenient, absolutely, but never important. Grandma trusted me with small things other people didn't want to bother with. I paid her bills. I picked up her groceries. I drove her to doctor visits when nobody else answered the phone. And when she got sick toward the end, I was the one sitting in that hospice room at 2 in the morning, holding her hand while the machines beeped and the hallway smelled like bleach and stale coffee. After she passed, she left me the ring, privately, quietly. It wasn't announced at a gathering. It wasn't part of some dramatic reading. She gave it to me during one of those last nights, pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. Said, "This is yours now, Lena. Don't let anyone tell you different." But the family didn't see it that way. They believed I had manipulated a sick old woman, that I had whispered in her ear and twisted her wishes when she was too weak to resist. They looked at me and saw someone who didn't have the money, the status, or the credentials to deserve anything. I wasn't rich or impressive. I didn't have a big house or a fancy title. But I listened. I showed up. I learned patience from caregiving that everyone else ignored. And that patience was about to be tested like never before. Now, before I go on, I want to talk to you for a second. If you were ever closer to a grandparent than you were to your own parents, you already understand something most people don't. That bond is different. It's quieter. It's deeper. And if you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, like you had to earn a seat at a table you were born at, then this story is for you. If you've ever been accused of manipulation just because you cared more than everyone else, I see you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about underestimated people who refused to disappear. Hit that like button right now. Show some hype before I tell you what happened next, because it gets worse before it gets better. 3 weeks after the funeral, my Aunt Patricia organized a gathering at her house. She said it was about dividing Grandma's sentimental items, photo albums, dishes, old quilts, things that didn't have monetary value but carried memories. I showed up thinking it would be emotional but simple. I was wrong. The moment I walked through the door, the energy was off. The living room smelled like lavender air freshener, the kind Aunt Patricia used to cover up cigarette smoke. There were about 15 people there, cousins, second cousins, a few neighbors who always seemed to appear when family business was being discussed. Patricia sat at the head of the dining table like she was running a board meeting. She looked at my hand and saw the ring. Her eyes locked onto it like a target. "That ring," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "belongs to the first daughter lineage. It should have come to me." I told her, "Grandma gave it to me personally during one of the hospice nights. She looked at me and she gave it to me and she told me to keep it." Patricia tilted her head like I was a child making up stories. Convenient memory when witnesses are gone. My cousin Derek, Patricia's son, laughed from across the room. "Come on, Lena, you really think Grandma skipped her own daughter and gave it to you? Be serious." Others nodded. A few looked away uncomfortably but said nothing. Then Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. Paperwork. She slapped it on the table and said, "Then let's prove who family really is." That's when everything erupted. People stared at me with a new kind of suspicion, like I had been exposed. The humiliation was deliberate. She had planned this in front of extended relatives and neighbors. She wanted an audience. She wanted me to crumble. I didn't. I looked at the kit in her hand and said, "Fine, I'll take the test." My voice didn't shake. My hands did, but I kept them at my sides. What I didn't know at the time was that Patricia had already submitted her own DNA sample weeks earlier. She had been building her case before anyone even knew there was a trial. After that gathering, things fell apart fast. Within 48 hours, I was removed from the family group chat, the one they had created to organize Grandma's memorial service. No explanation, no message, just gone. I found out later that Patricia had told everyone I stole heirlooms from Grandma's house while she was dying, that I went through drawers while she slept, that I pocketed jewelry and small valuables nobody would notice. None of it was true, but the story spread faster than any correction ever could. My messages were unanswered, calls went to voicemail. People I had known my entire life suddenly treated me like I was radioactive. Then came the church incident, 2 Sundays later, at a luncheon after the service. The fellowship hall was crowded. People were eating casseroles and talking softly. I was standing near the dessert table when Patricia walked up with 2 other women from the congregation. She didn't whisper, she spoke at full volume. "I just think it's sad when someone who might not even share our blood tries to claim what isn't theirs." People turned. Forks stopped moving. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing above me. Someone behind me whispered, "I heard she's not really one of them." I stood there with a paper plate in my hand and my face burning. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, but I felt something crack inside me. Not break, crack, like a window hit by a rock, still standing but fractured in every direction. Then Patricia sent Derek to do the close-range work. He called me one evening, sounding almost sympathetic. "Look, Lena, just give back the ring. Avoid the shame. Mom's talking about hiring a lawyer. She's saying elder exploitation. You don't want that kind of fight." Elder exploitation? For sitting with my grandmother while she died? For holding her hand and changing her sheets? And reading her favorite psalms out loud because the sound of my voice calmed her? That's when I realized this wasn't grief. Patricia wasn't mourning her mother. She was trying to control the inheritance narrative. She wanted the ring not because it meant something to her, but because it meant something to me, and she couldn't stand that. So I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped trying to convince people who had already made up their minds. Instead, I started quietly collecting information. Every text message Patricia sent, every voicemail Derek left, every public accusation she made at church or family events. I saved everything. And I waited. There was something Grandma told me once that I didn't fully understand at the time. It was during one of her last coherent weeks. She grabbed my wrist and said, "Lena, the documents in my closet, the ones in the blue folder, keep them safe. Don't show anyone until you need to." I had taken the folder home that night. It was labeled in Grandma's handwriting for Lena only. I had opened it once, briefly. Inside were letters, old certificates, a few photographs I didn't recognize. I read some of the letters, but they referenced people and events I didn't know, so I put it away and forgot about it. Until now. I pulled the folder out again after Derek's phone call. This time, I read everything slowly. Some of the letters were between Grandma and a lawyer. Others were personal, written in her careful, slanted script. One letter mentioned a family matter that must stay buried for Patricia's sake. Another referenced a hospital record from 1968, the year Patricia was born. The DNA test timeline Patricia was using to question my legitimacy didn't add up. She claimed my mother was secretly adopted in 1972, but the documents in Grandma's folder told a completely different story. What they didn't know was that Grandma planned ahead. She knew this day might come. She knew someone might try to use bloodlines as weapons, and she had prepared her defense long before the attack ever started. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet, not until the stage was set. So I kept acting passive. I kept my head down. I let them think I was defeated. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. I was at the clinic, filing patient intake forms, when a number I didn't recognize appeared on my screen. The voice on the other end was calm and measured. "Howard, this is Howard Baines. I was your grandmother's attorney for over 30 years. I think we need to talk." Howard had heard about the accusations through a mutual friend at church. He was retired, mostly, but he told me he still had copies of everything he had ever filed for my grandparents. He asked me to meet him at his home office that Saturday. When I arrived, his desk was covered in manila folders and yellowed documents. The room smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco. He didn't waste time. "Your grandmother came to me about 8 years ago," he said. "She wanted to make sure certain things were protected. She specifically named you as the recipient of her ring and several personal effects. She signed notarized statements, witnessed, dated, legally sound." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were the notarized statements, clear as day. But there was more. Howard leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "I've known Patricia since she was a teenager," he said. "This sudden obsession with lineage and DNA, it doesn't sit right with me. Your grandmother never once questioned your place in this family, but she did make some unusual requests regarding Patricia's records, requests that suggested she was protecting someone." He didn't say more than that. He didn't have to. Meanwhile, the family was getting arrogant. Patricia organized a formal will review, pressuring the estate executor to schedule a meeting where everyone could address the discrepancies. She announced it like a courtroom drama, a public reading to clear lies permanently. She was so confident. She had the DNA test, she had the family on her side, she had the narrative locked down. When they sent me the invitation, I accepted immediately. Patricia probably thought I was surrendering. She had no idea I was already prepared. The meeting was held on a Thursday afternoon. It was the largest conference room he had, and it was still barely big enough. Patricia sat at the far end of the table with Derek beside her. 6 other relatives filled the remaining chairs. A few stood along the walls. Patricia had dressed for the occasion, full makeup, pressed blazer. She looked like she was about to deliver a closing argument, and in her mind, she was. She started before anyone else could speak. "Thank you all for coming. I think it's important that we settle this once and for all." She opened a folder and pulled out a printed report, the DNA results. She held them up and read the key findings out loud. Based on the analysis, Lena Whitaker's maternal line does not match the direct Whitaker genetic profile in the expected pattern. She looked at me, which confirms what I've been saying. Her mother was not a biological Whitaker. Therefore, Lena has no legitimate claim to family heirlooms. The room was quiet. A few people looked at me with pity. Others looked away. Derek smiled. Patricia sat back like she had just won a verdict. Then Howard spoke. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "Patricia, thank you for sharing that. I'd like to request the full report, please, not just the summary page." Patricia hesitated but handed it over. Howard put on his reading glasses and reviewed it silently for a full minute. Then he opened his own folder. "I have here a second DNA comparison," he said, "conducted using preserved biological records your mother, Evelyn Whitaker, left in my care before her passing. She provided a hair sample and a sealed cheek swab specifically for this purpose. She anticipated this exact scenario." The room shifted. People leaned forward. Patricia's expression changed. Not yet panic, but the confidence was gone. Howard continued. "The results are clear." He paused. Not for drama. He paused because what he was about to say would change everything. Lena Whitaker's maternal line is consistent with the Whitaker family genetics. However, he looked directly at Patricia. "Your DNA, Patricia, does not match the Whitaker paternal line at all." Silence.
absolute silence. The sound of the wall clock ticking filled the room like a drumbeat. Howard explained it plainly. Decades ago, Grandpa Whitaker was not Patricia's biological father. There had been an affair, a cover-up. Grandma knew, she had always known, and she had protected Patricia her entire life. She never told anyone. She raised Patricia as her own, without hesitation, without resentment, without condition. But she also knew that one day, Patricia's obsession with bloodline might be turned into a weapon against someone else. So she prepared. She left the evidence with Howard, she left the letters with me, and she left the ring to the one person who never once questioned whether love required a matching strand of DNA. Patricia's face went white. Derek stood up and started shouting, "This is a lie! You fabricated this!" Howard didn't flinch. "The lab results are certified and available for independent verification. Your mother's preserved samples are documented with a chain of custody. I'm happy to provide copies to anyone who requests them." Two of the cousins started arguing. One of the neighbors who had come along suddenly found somewhere else to look. Patricia sat frozen. Her mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. The lawyer confirmed what the documents made undeniable. Patricia had no biological claim to the Whitaker name, under the very standard she had tried to use against me. She had no legal claim to the ring. She had no legal claim to any heirloom she had demanded. The humiliation she had so carefully constructed for me had landed squarely on her own shoulders.
I didn't celebrate. I picked up my purse, thanked Howard quietly, and walked out of the office. The hallway was cool and dim. I could still hear voices rising behind a closed door. Accusations, denial. Someone was crying. I kept walking. The ring was on my finger, not as a trophy, not as proof of victory, just as a memory of a woman who smelled like lavender lotion and hummed hymns while she cooked. A woman who saw me when nobody else did. In the weeks that followed, some relatives reached out privately. Short texts, awkward phone calls, a few apologies that felt genuine. Most didn't say anything at all, which honestly said everything. Patricia stopped coming to family gatherings. Derek blocked me on social media, which I considered a gift. I didn't chase anyone down for closure. I didn't demand public retractions. I didn't need the family to rebuild itself around me. I just needed them to stop trying to tear me out. Grandma understood something that Patricia never did. Blood didn't define family. Presence did. Showing up did. Sitting in a dark room at 2 in the morning holding someone's hand while they were scared, that's what made you family. Not a test, not a certificate, not a name on a chart. She tried to erase me from the family tree, but Grandma had already planted me there. If you're watching this and your family has ever questioned where you belong, I want you to know something. Their doubt doesn't define your place. If someone has ever called you not real family because of adoption, because of remarriage, because of any reason they invented to make themselves feel more entitled, you are not the problem. They are. I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an heirloom dispute? Has someone in your family used DNA or bloodline to try to exclude you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them, every single one. And if this story hit close to home, subscribe. I share honest stories about real family dynamics, the messy, painful, complicated truth that nobody puts in the holiday card. Click hype to help this story reach someone who needs to hear it today. Before you go, I want to say one more thing. Your story matters. Whatever you've been through, whatever they told you that you weren't, you survived it, and that counts for something. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment and tell me what part of this story stayed with you. Share it with someone who might be going through something similar right now. Click hype so this reaches the people who need it most. And thank you. Seriously, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.